Cool. So are we live?
We're back. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure when the last live stream cut out, so we are going to start back over again with Mark doing his number 9.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so my number 9, in case I got cut off, is The Naked Gun. I guess we won't talk too much about it because we already talked a bit about it when we got cut off. But yeah, basically, it's the only non-science fiction movie on my list. It's a hilarious comedy. To me, it's a classic. Yeah, a lot of the classic stuff. So it's just a great comedy. I absolutely love it.
And like I was saying, like I don't know if we got cut off, but I didn't remember Naked Gun at all until I went and looked through the 80s movies and I went, oh man. And it didn't make my list. I really wanted to put it there though, but there was just so much in front of it that I couldn't squeeze it in.
And I don't really like comedy, so.
And she doesn't like to laugh.
I am so weird, like different from everybody. I don't like comedies.
Well, the thing is that I actually am not a fan of any like modern comedies. Like a lot of these like 2000 comedies and the modern ones that are coming out now, I just don't like comedy films. But I'm into the classic ones that I saw as a kid that just stuck with me. And Naked Gun to me, it still holds up to this day. It's just barrel of laughs. I mean, we're talking about the whole Ricardo Montalban, the whole baseball scene where he's like singing the American anthem badly. It's just classic comedy moments that I think can't be beat.
Okay, and so I think that brings us to Anna.
Okay, so my number 9 is The Thing. I love really bad horror movies. Like, I love them. That's my thing. Like, everybody else has the comedies. I like bad 80s horror movies. They crack me up.
I don't think I've ever seen the 80s version of The Thing. I think I've seen the one from, what was it, the 50s or the 60s? But I don't think I've seen
there was also one from like a few years ago that I saw at the theaters.
Oh, was that?
Yeah, that came out like The Thing is the one with Kurt Russell, right?
Yes.
Was The Thing? Yeah.
Yeah,
there was
Kurt
a remake.
Russell.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually took some of my students to see it like recently, like in the recent one, like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. But I don't know if I've ever seen the 80s one either.
After I watched the new one, I was like, oh, this is really good. And then I went back and watched the one from the 80s. I think it was on Netflix at the time. And I was like, sweet. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't remember if I actually saw the whole thing of this movie or not. Yeah.
I
can't really say.
I haven't seen this movie, so this is something I'm probably going to have to watch.
Yeah.
It's funny, like, I know about The Thing. I'm not sure if I've ever actually seen it, though.
It's pretty good. I think it's pretty good.
I thought you said it was a bad movie.
It's a good bad.
So bad it's good. So bad.
Yeah.
Like Howard the Duck.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
I gotta shout out to that Walking Dead fanboy, AJ. Great comment there. Anna, I had a great day today. Traveled back in time to get a denominator.
Yeah.
So call out to one of our blooper videos.
Yeah, I was having
Right.
that.
Okay, so my number 9 is Transformers the movie. The only animated film on my list, and I remember my sister took me to see this in the theater, and it absolutely wrecked my world when Optimus Prime died. Spoiler alerts. and then when in the cartoon, when they brought him back and he died again, I was like, Jesus, come on.
You know what? Transformers the movie is actually on my list.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you where on my list it's on, but I'm actually surprised that it's on anyone else's list besides mine.
That's still I still love. I can still sit down and watch it and enjoy it. And even back in 1986 when it came out, there are loads of animation mistakes in it and color mistakes. I don't care. It's a fantastic movie, and I will never not love it.
I didn't even remember that there was an animated Transformers movie until just now. I love the show. We watched the show on a regular basis, and the movie was just the show put in movie form. Or I don't even remember this.
It was a transitional movie because in between seasons 3 and 4, they decided, hey, we need new characters so we can sell more toys.
We need new toys.
Right. So basically, so Transformers the movie was like we're wiping out the entirety of the season 1 and season 2 characters, bringing in brand new characters, and this was the transitional period. So I'm like, you know what? For not knowing that that's what it was supposed to be about, I think they did a pretty decent job.
Yeah. And just it was so traumatic as a kid who loved these characters and these toys to have all my favorites die in the first 5 minutes. At the time, it was really rough. Now, as an adult, I'm like, man, that was actually kind of brave.
Well, you just spoiled the movie for me. No, you just spoiled it.
I think I have some vague memories of being a kid and having friends going, "Oh my god, all the Transformers die!" and like freaking out. But to be honest, I really don't remember this movie. I have heard of it like recently over YouTube and stuff, and I know that didn't like Orson Welles do like a voice of like a planet or something, and
it was Orson Welles' last role ever, and did the voice of the big villain that many people who were really into Transformers back in the 80s have been waiting to see in live action form, but that fucker Michael Bay keeps on doing it. God damn it, we want Unicron!
And then, dude, Stan Bush, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time, is in that movie. I will never not get chills hearing Stan Bush sing The Touch.
Listen,
I sound really perverted now, just thinking like that. But.
No, you know what? I still listen to the Transformers soundtrack. I have.
When I work out.
I have the Transformers soundtrack on my iPhone. I listen to it at least once a month.
All right. So I think we've gushed about that enough. I think we're up to number 8 now, Acton.
We had number 8. Okay, so my number 8, actually, speaking of Naked Gun, I had mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this before we got cut off or not, but I was saying I was also struggling between Naked Gun and Airplane, and I only wanted to put one. It's good that Mark went with Naked Gun because I actually went with Airplane. Just really would put Leslie Nielsen on the map. And really everything that Leslie Nielsen did besides Airplane and then the Naked Gun, the first 2 Naked Gun movies and everything after that he's done in like the 2000s have been pure crap. But this is this is what really put him on the map. And Robert Stack in this movie as the boss guy there. And then of course Lloyd Bridges. You know, I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. Yeah. And and this is one that Mark and I and our third brother used to quote endlessly. The tower, Rapunzel.
Oh yeah,
Rapunzel. So, again. I ended up putting a lot of comedies on my lists, and Airplane is number 8.
Yeah, my mind just went to not to Airplane, but to a call out from Airplane in Family Guy in one of the Star Wars spoofs, and Leon's getting larger.
Oh yeah,
oh yeah.
the premium version.
So many classic moments in the film. Like that one guy who was saying stuff like that was just so weird. It was just so random. It was just hilarious. And and don't call me Shirley.
Yeah, which is probably the most memorable line because it's just like, wait, what? That was the most random. Like, Shirley, you're joking. I never joke, and don't call me Shirley. Oh man. Oh, well, so I guess it's up to my number 8 now.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, my number 8, and this might be higher on someone else's list, but it is E.T. That is the first movie that I ever cried at. Like, I think I was like maybe 3 years old when I saw that movie, and I just remember when E.T. left, I cried because I was just like, why does he have to go back to wherever the hell he's from? You know, that movie was it still holds up today in terms of special effects, in terms of, you know, I guess some of the social and political messages, because you got the government who's up to their shady, nefarious things, and you got the kid who just wants to protect his friend. And I mean, come on, man, how can you not fall in love with E.T.? Elliot, and the glowy finger and all that. I mean, that is such a great film, and you know, people have talked about them wanting to make a sequel for years. I'm like, no, just leave it as is. It's perfect where it's at.
Yeah, I think thankfully Spielberg feels the same way, which is why it never got made. But yeah, I gotta say, I considered this for my top 10. It didn't quite make it, but I think this is a classic 80s Spielberg film. And not only do I think it holds up, I actually appreciate it more watching it as an adult once I understood more of the intricacies of the film. And just the whole sort of style that they're trying to replicate now with like Super 8 and Stranger Things. But for the most part, it's that you can't find that style anywhere else. So, or other than the 80s, I should say. But yeah, it's definitely a great pick. Love that movie.
Yeah, actually, I got to be honest. This is one that did not follow me through my teenagehood and into my adulthood. And I tried watching it recently within the last 10 years. And I don't know. It's just not one that stuck with me. So I didn't even consider this one for my list, to be honest. It's one that I loved when I was, 8? But it's not really one that stuck with me. So, yes.
Yeah. I've watched E.T., I don't know, probably a dozen times. And every single time, I just can't watch when E.T. starts to get sick. I have to fast forward to the end until he's better. Put the sheet on him or whatever, and then they get on the bikes. And then I can pick it up from there, and I'm good.
I'm not sure if I've ever seen it in its entirety. I know I've seen pieces of it, but I don't think I've seen the whole movie. I don't know. It was just one. I'd probably like it now, maybe, if I watched it now.
I feel like that's one that we should maybe get on Netflix or something and watch all the way through, because I've never watched it all the way through.
Okay, so now we all have to do an 80s movie marathon of all the
movies. Pardon me, acting geeks. I think there's something that the people out there would like to say to you.
Shame!
Shame is all you want.
I think it's a classic. All right, cool. So are we on to my number 8 then?
Right on.
Right. So my number 8, I would imagine, would be higher on some other people's lists. But ranked number 8 for me, and that is Back to the Future. To me, I mean, we talked about this in the last video we did. This is a classic sort of time travel movie. It's whenever people think of time travel, they always go to Back to the Future, and there's a reason for that. I mean, they took a premise that's actually quite sort of like, people say, oh, what a great family movie, but it's basically about this kid trying to avoid being banged by his mom. But they took the premise and they actually made it quite funny, and they put a lot of like humor into it and the whole time travel thing. And I don't think any film since it had got the formula just right. So that is my pick for number 8, Back to the Future.
Back to the Future would make my top 20, but not my top 10. I like Back to the Future. I've probably seen it almost as many times as like The Empire Strikes Back, for instance. I've seen it a ton of times, but I just wouldn't have cracked my top 10.
Yeah, it wasn't even a contender on mine, but I think it's because it's a comedy, and you know how I feel about comedy. Like, I do enjoy it more than most comedies, but yeah, I'm just not a comedy person.
Yeah, but it's also an action adventure sci-fi comedy. It's not just like a straight up comedy. Like an airplane or Naked Gun is just purely comedy. This is it's also a sci-fi element, and well, I'll just say Back to the Future is coming up on my list. I haven't. It's a bit higher for me, so it's coming.
Yeah, same here. Back to the Future, one of my favorites in the 80s. So yeah, it's definitely going to be higher on my list. And Anna. Anna.
It would make my top 20, just not my top 10.
It might make my top 20. Like I said, it doesn't make my top 10 because I'm just not really that into comedy stuff, and it did have a lot of comedy in it. But I like it more than most other comedies because it was also geeky and it had action and all that stuff. So I think that puts it up there, like in a top 10 of 80s comedies, it would be right at the top.
if we were doing film scores, if we were rating film scores, I think Back to the Future would be in my top 3.
Oh, the music, yeah. Okay, it's my turn?
Your turn.
All right. My number 8 is A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nice one.
I told you, I love 80s horror.
So the original.
Yeah, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes. Love that movie.
Yeah, I was always partial to Nightmare on Elm Street 3 myself.
Oh, really?
But all of them, which I did watch recently and realized it was a terrible movie, but I loved it back at the time.
I rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street recently. The whole thing, and I still love the first movie. It's awful, but I still love it.
You watched all of them?
Yes, I watched all of them. Yeah.
Well, no, to be fair, I haven't rewatched the original recently. It was part 3 that I rewatched, and I was like, man, this is a terrible movie. But I loved all of them at the time. I loved them all at the time.
Oh yeah, I just remember being really hugely into this when I was a kid, but I tried watching them as adults, and like the first one was passable. I don't think it's bad, but I just didn't care for it as much as I used to when I was a kid.
I used to watch it all the time when I was really little. Like when I remember, like very, very young, like 4 or 5, watching this show and like over and over and over again. I just loved it, and I think that it has such nostalgia for me that like this film can't go wrong for me.
Okay, so I guess we'll do mine.
Yep. Yours.
All right, my number 8 is The Never-Ending Story. I absolutely love this film, and it has so much nostalgia for me. And little information about me: the Never-Ending Story. I had my first like real human crush. Like as people, our first crushes are usually cartoons. Now, my first like crush on another human being was for the childlike princess. She was so pretty to, and I was all about her. And, and I watched it again not that long ago, and it holds up really well. Not perfectly, but it holds up pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is an underrated fantasy 80s movie. I think this, like, for me, when I was a kid, when this first came out, I loved it to death. But even later, it does sort of, and it has that really, really sad moment, of course, with, the horse dying. And it was just like, for kids especially, it's just like, I think spoilers are okay to talk about.
Yeah, I'm joking. Yeah, movies are at least 30 years old. If you haven't seen them, then that's you've had time. So I was joking. I was joking about the spoiler.
Yeah, The Never-Ending Story will forever be in my heart.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's one that didn't quite make my list. I was really considering putting it on. I chose something else, which I'll actually use my number 7. So I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But I can't blame you for this choice at all. It's a good solid choice for especially for fantasy 80s movies.
And you know what's funny, because like I kind of feel bad for like kids who are growing up today, and you know they'll never really have that experience of having some of these kind of movies that came out during the 80s, and like the cartoons. And you know, I tell my little cousins about some of this stuff, and they're like, huh, what are you talking about? And I just have to, you know, hand them Blu-rays and like, here, look this up on YouTube. And yes, I know it makes me sound old as all hell, but damn it, you need to know.
And
Anyway,
I think but one last thing about this one, and then we'll move to number 7. The Never-Ending Story is great in that it kind of captures like both of the like, I think everybody every little boy anyway that I knew kind of saw themselves in real life as Bastian, the little boy who was running away from the bullies and hiding in, you know, the library or wherever it was he was hiding, and reading the book and just waiting for the rain to stop. But every boy wanted to be Atreyu. So it had both of those elements in it. I think that's just what the magic is for that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to number 7.
Okay, my number 7, and this is a good transition because I figure I got to put something from the fantasy genre on this list somewhere. I didn't feel like the 80s was a big decade for fantasies. I was never blown away by Willow. Sorry if somebody else put that on their list, or and Dark Crystal. I don't really remember. So it was between Neverending Story and then the one that I did edge at that one out that I chose, which is The Princess Bride, which is kind of fantasy, kind of a comedy, but it's another classic one. You know, it's a good family film, like for everybody, for the kids, men and women alike. Some people might consider it a chick flick. I know that both of my major relationships, my current wife and my ex-girlfriend who I was with for many years, both of them have memorized this movie from start to finish. And I've heard many quotes on it, and I've watched it recently with each of them. So I think it still holds up. I think it's just a classic.
Yeah, this one's higher on my list, but yeah, right there with you. I love this movie.
Oh, see, you break the whole comedy thing as a but yeah,
but it's not primarily a comedy. It's not first and foremost a comedy.
Princess Bride is definitely a classic. It didn't make my top 10, but trust me, it was a fight, and that's why, you know, I say that I've been saying is like, this was not an enviable task whatsoever, because there's so many great movies that came out in the 80s, and this is one of them. And you know, it's one that I have to watch at least once a year, you know,
right.
just for my own sanity. So yeah, great choice.
Yeah, I really.
Oh, sorry. It was tough not having this in my top 10. Like, I feel like I was doing backflips to shoehorn it in, and I'm like, man, there's just so many things I like a little bit better. But Princess Bride is a fantastic movie.
I really like this movie, but I didn't really consider it for my top 10. I don't think I wouldn't watch it like once a year. I don't think it's that great, but it's a good movie. There's a lot of good moments, a lot of memorable lines, like the inconceivable and all that. So yeah, it was definitely a classic 80s movie that should be, yeah, it's good.
Okay, who's next?
Don. Right?
All right, so my number 7, classic 80s sci-fi action horror, and gave us one of the most iconic lines that people say in and out of context all the time, and that is, "I'll be back." And that is The Terminator. This movie, when I saw it, Arnold Schwarzenegger was the most frightening man on the planet. When he, you know, rolls up and is like, "Sarah Connor," yes, kicks open the door, and then boom, it's like, holy shit. You know, that scene in the very beginning with the punks, who one of them is Bill Paxton. Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, fuck you, asshole! Fuck you, asshole!" Yeah, come on. Oh man, like that movie. So many quotable lines, and you know, Terminator 2. I think sometimes gets more credit than it deserves as far as being a better movie than the first one. But I mean, like the first one gave you a brand new premise and a great kind of universe to jump off, even though anything after Terminator 2 probably shouldn't have even existed. But yeah, I mean that was just such an 80s movie. Everything about it, the look, the feel, and it was just like pulse pounding action. And the story was a particularly interesting story because it gave you this cyclical time loop. And at the time, like really until the second Terminator, you really didn't even realize that it set up this kind of time loop with Kyle Reese being John Connor's father. And that's what makes it even greater, because it's like, wow, they kind of built this loop in there that we might not have even known about otherwise. But yeah, I can't talk enough about that movie, but I'll let somebody else take the reins.
I really loved Terminator as well. It didn't make my top 10, but when I first started writing my list down, I knew what my 1, 2, and 3 would be, and it was filling in 4 through 10, and I had Terminator in there, and then it just kept going down the list in Excel. When I first made it, I made it in Excel, and it just kept going down. But man, it was one that before I really started looking, oh, this wasn't in the 80s. This was in the 80s. It was in my original top 10. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and actually, this is in my top 10. It's still coming. It's up a little bit higher. So I'll talk about it when I get to it, I guess.
Yeah, it didn't quite make my top 10. It was considered, nearly made it, but because I do think I totally agree with Don that it's much better than the second one. The second one gets all the praise, and to me, it was always my personal favorite. I just love the relationship, the sort of romance they set up between Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor. It's a tragedy where he dies, but then we find out it's always meant to happen. So it was like, yeah, it was awesome. I loved it, but not quite top 10 material for me. We're close.
All right, so I guess we'll go to Mark.
Oh, cool. So my number 7, you'll start to notice the pattern here because, sorry, anyone familiar with my channel knows how big of a Star Trek geek I am. So I had to have at least several Star Trek movies in my top 10. And so my number 7 is Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I think this is the most underrated Star Trek movie. It's my second favorite Star Trek movie. Whenever anyone talks about how the even movies are awesome, the odd movies suck, I'm like, what? Star Trek 3 Star Trek 3 was great. I mean, some people put it down because it's when it's a shameless bringing back a dead character to life, but when I first saw it in the 80s, that thing didn't really bother me because I was still young, kind of used to it. Let's just bring characters back to life. But the way they did it with Kirk, like stealing the Enterprise and breaking through, and then having Christopher Lloyd play the villain, and that classic line of "I have had enough of you" was just great. I mean, there was cheesiness to it, but it was the right amount of cheesy. So I always loved this movie. So that's my number 7.
Mark, don't forget the famous line. You Klingon bastard! You killed my son.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I actually decided I wanted to have some variety, so I made this personal rule for myself You guys could obviously do what you want, but I only wanted to put one movie per franchise on the list, so I chose a different Star Trek movie. So I didn't put this one on my list, nor did I put Star Trek 4. But actually, both of them are great, and I don't blame you for putting it on your list. I think this is an underrated Star Trek film. I agree with that.
I would, you know what, for anyone who would say that the way they brought Spock back was cheesy, I mean, I think they set it up at the end of the second movie with the whole Genesis probe. So, you know, I think anybody who has issues with them bringing back Spock, you know, should just look at the end when they shot his damn Genesis probe into that planet. You know. But yeah, look, I like the Search for Spock. You know, Christopher Lloyd as a Klingon. I mean, because this is one of the places where we get the modern looking versions of the Klingons. You know, when they didn't just look like humans with weird hair.
Yeah, well, this is basically, like, we saw them in one brief scene in the motion picture, but this is basically the birth of the modern Klingons. Like, the Klingons we know from Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, this is where it all started.
Right, and I think they did a great job with this movie. This is one of my favorite Star Trek movies as well. You know, I'm not an even odd guy, as you all know by the Voyage Home, but yeah. Oh man.
You know, I pretty much enjoyed Star Trek 3. It's not in my top 10. It probably wouldn't make my top 5 Star Trek movies. But I think the thing about Star Trek 3, it might be actually the most important Star Trek movie out of all of them.
Have I seen this one?
I don't think so. I don't think you have.
I don't think I've seen it.
But because the things that Kirk does in Star Trek 3 gets him demoted, so he's a captain again. It brings Spock back to life. It gives us one of the most the follow-up to it, because the Enterprise explodes. Sorry, spoilers. At the end of Star Trek 3, it gives us a different feel for Star Trek 4, because they hijack the Klingon warbird. So it gives us a whole different feel for Star Trek 4. I mean, it's a hugely important Star Trek movie, and definitely underrated. Okay. I think you're next. And you have a kitty. Do you want me to take the kitty?
That's all right. My number 7, right?
Yeah, we're number 7.
My number 7 is The Dark Crystal. I loved The Dark Crystal.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
So good.
That's it?
That's it. I can't remember a lot of it, but like I remember watching it when I was a kid, and just like I just loved it.
So this is just an emotional.
Yeah, it's kind of like an emotional, nostalgic feel, and I think I'd still like it. Like I think it would hold up. I haven't watched it recently. I didn't have time to rewatch it. I wanted to, but I didn't have time to. But I think I would still like it. Okay.
Have you guys seen Dark Crystal?
I haven't in a long time, so I wouldn't really remember it enough to put it in my movie, or my top 10. So yeah, I remember liking it, but it's been too long. I don't really remember what happens in it even.
Yeah, sorry, not since the 80s.
Yeah, one of my earliest childhood memories is when I was like 4 years old or something, and I had a babysitter come over, and I was watching The Dark Crystal on repeat, and she's like, "Oh, let's watch this other movie, Tootsie, where this guy dresses up as a woman." Like, no, I want to watch Dark Crystal over and over again. But I actually did try watching this when I was a bit older, and I just remember not caring for it, but it's been, even then, it was a while ago. It was like when I was a teenager. So, yeah, again, it's hard for me to talk about it because I barely remember it at all.
Okay, any final thoughts on Dark Crystal? No. No? All right. Josh needs to watch it. That's the final thought on Dark Crystal.
You do.
Do that. All right, so my number 7 is Conan the Barbarian, another Schwarzenegger movie. Don's was Terminator. Mine's Conan the Barbarian. I still love this movie. I have it on Blu-ray, and when I'm bored on a Thursday and you're at work, I'll pull it out and watch it. Just it again, it's iconic lines, iconic moments for Schwarzenegger. You know, Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of the women. Oh my God, it's amazing.
I've never seen it.
You're gonna.
Well, sounds like you two are going to have an 80s movie marathon.
And you've never seen Conan the Barbarian?
Nope. There's actually a lot of movies from the 80s I haven't seen. Like, my list of all the movies I saw that were from the 80s was pretty short, like probably 20 or so. Like, it's ridiculous. I need to fix this.
Because you're young.
I'm sorry, Anna. The people have spoken.
Shame. This is my whole list of everything I've See?
Yeah, when I was a teenager,
your full list fits on a post-it.
2 Post-its.
when I was a teenager, I went on an Arnold Schwarzenegger fix. And I was obsessed with his movies, and I would like watch them all on the repeat. So I have seen this movie for then, but it's never been one of my favorites, to be honest. I don't know. It's just not my thing. Just say that.
I think the last time I saw this might have been 1984, 85, so I really have zero memory of it. That line you just quoted, no memory of that. I don't remember. And I don't remember being blown away by it either, like Mark. That's probably why I haven't seen it since then. So, yeah, I'll have to. This is another one. I'll have to check it out again and see what I think of it. It's been forever.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Pardon one moment, Mr. Tomko.
Shame.
It's another one that the score would make my top 3 of movie scores of all time. Oh my God, I'm at a loss for words as to what exactly else to say about it. It's so good.
Oh man, was it Tulsa Doom?
Jones was amazing in that movie.
What I mean, like,
play a villain. That's actually like he voiced Darth Vader, but to actually see him play a villain.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and you know what? Yes, that wig that he had on absolutely made no sense, but it didn't matter because he was so good in the role.
The trio of glow and everything, and
when he tells the girl, "Come to me, my child," and she just jumps off it, basically commits suicide because she's just that devoted. Oh man, like, yeah, that movie is classic. Oh man, Josh, thank you.
Okay, I think we'll move on to number 6. Acton, your turn.
Okay, it's gonna seem like my old top 10 is comedies, but actually it's just the first 5. I have a bunch of comedies. This is actually a comedy sci-fi, and to me this is the ultimate parody movie, and that is Spaceballs, and it is because I was so into the Star Wars trilogy to have this parody done so perfectly. On it, and since then I've become fan. I didn't really know Mel Brooks movies back at the time, so I became a fan of other Mel Brooks movies after the fact. But to me, always the best Mel Brooks movie and the best direct parody of any film.
I would definitely agree. It's the best Mel Brooks movie out of the bunch. In fact, we watched Blazing Saddles again, and that's not nearly as funny as I remember it being.
Yeah.
Spaceballs is funny every time I watch it.
And Spaceballs is one of the few comedies that I actually enjoy.
Yeah. It was Wilder died. We watched Blazing Saddles again. It's just not as funny as I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I remember is when I first saw this in the theater, and that scene where Mel Brooks is playing the yogurt, and he goes, "And may the Schwartz be with you." I remember laughing hysterically for like 10 minutes. I think my mom had to take me out of the theater because I was disturbing everyone because I was just laughing so much. I think you might remember when we were kids, I would just repeat that over and over again for like the next year. I just love that so much.
Or two, yeah, at least.
Yeah.
That was such a classic movie, and the fact that they were able to spoof Star Wars in such a grandiose fashion. I mean, because you had so many of the regular elements of Star Wars that they pulled in there, but the fact that they took so many left turns with it, like when they're in. Like when they're on the planet, like we have to comb the desert, and you get down there and they're out there with actual comb.
Yeah,
and
It's so funny.
yeah, whatever, and the scene where they're shooting at the princess's spaceship, and he was like, "I said across her nose, not up it." It's like, who the hell are you? He's like, asshole, gunner, asshole. He's like, what? He was like, yes. He was like, who the hell is signed? He was like, it's my cousin. It's like, who are you? Major asshole. How many assholes do I have on this ship?
How many assholes we got on this ship anyway? And everybody,
Oh my god.
he was
Yeah,
awesome.
he puts down the mask, like, keep firing, asshole.
And we can't
Just talking about
we can't forget the classic I am your father's cousin's brother's uncle's former roommate.
yeah.
what the hell is that?
Yeah.
I am your father's cousin's uncle's brother's former roommate. Well, what does that make me and you? Nothing.
Oh god.
Oh, man. Okay.
I will say real quick that this I actually prefer Nick Again in the Airplane to this as a spoof movie, so it didn't quite make my top 10. But as you can see, definitely a classic. Loved it.
Right. So I guess I'm up next with my number 6, right?
Yes, sir.
So my number 6, I'm pretty sure is probably not going to be on anyone else's list. And I know I've said that before, but I'm pretty sure about this one. And this one is Coming to America. As far as Eddie Murphy movies back during his heyday, and also 80s movies, and especially 80s movies set in New York, when New York was one of the worst places to live in all of America. I thought this encapsulated so much, and it was a great comedy. And if you guys have not seen it, do yourself a favor and go and check out that movie, because that movie is absolutely hilarious. Wait. So, a couple other people have seen it here. Okay. And, what? Oh, okay. Never mind.
I was laughing because I'm like, you're totally talking to me.
Oh, man. Yeah, listen, Coming to America. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else here has seen it, but if you want to, see Eddie Murphy when he was actually funny, this is one of like the 3 movies that you must see if you thought that Eddie Murphy was funny at one point.
Okay, so there's Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours, and Coming to America? Are those the 3? Or is it Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2?
Nah, Beverly Hills Cop 1, 48 Hours, and Coming to America.
Not Trading Places? I like Trading Places.
I mean, but like Trading Places wasn't, like
He wasn't billing on that, though. Dan Aykroyd was.
Yeah,
Right.
That's true.
I
But he
mean,
was good.
don't get me wrong. It's a classic Eddie Murphy film, and it has a lot of nuance to it. But in terms of like one that was Eddie Murphy showcased, those 3 movies, Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours, and Coming to America. And it's funny because Mortimer and Randolph are actually in Coming to America. There's a small cameo with them in there. So
we're back, Mortimer.
Oh man.
I think Coming to America is a solid choice. Like, it didn't make my top 10. It's not one of my personal favorites, but I do remember it being a very good movie. I think it is the best Eddie Murphy movie from the 80s, personally, or Eddie Murphy movie, period. Although you guys haven't mentioned The Golden Child. I quite like that one too. Yeah. But yeah, Coming to America was definitely solid.
Golden Child was not as popular. I mean, we liked it, but not a lot. It wasn't as.
Okay.
It was got a lot of mixed reviews. But yeah, Coming to America is a solid choice too. It's probably the best Eddie Murphy movie. Honestly, it's been years since I've seen it, and I don't remember it enough to put it on my list. But it came up when I was doing, trying to narrow it down to top 10. I found a bunch of 80s. I actually went through the top 1,000 on IMDb and just wrote down a bunch of movies as I was clicking through it. And Coming to America was one I considered, but I decided I just don't remember it well enough to include it. So maybe it's one that I should watch again.
I would definitely suggest watching that again. I mean, there's so many. To me, there are so many classic lines and just part of the story. Like when he first arrives in America, and like he's a prince. He's this African prince who's never been outside of his country. He's used to having servants at his feet, and he goes to get a cab, and he sticks out his hand and it's like, halt! And the cab driver stops the car, gets out, and is like, "You dumb fuck!"
Just saying that part, I have seen it. I have seen this one. I remember him as a prince trying to hail a cab. Like, I remember that. So I'm like, I have seen this. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, and the other part where he's like, he wants the most rundown apartment in Queens. He goes, out to his balcony, and he's like, "Good morning, my neighbors," and somebody yells, "Hey, fuck you!" And he's like, "Yes, fuck you."
Yeah, that is the main part I remember from the movie.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that's classic.
Yeah, so for those of you out there who have not seen Coming to America, do yourself a favor and watch that movie.
Okay, Mark,
so we're on to number 6. Okay, so number 6 for me is a movie I actually didn't see until the 90s, so I didn't actually see it in the 80s. And I think I would personally put it up there as one of the most underrated movies of all time. That is 2010, The Year We Made Contact, which is a sequel to 2001. A lot of people didn't like this movie because it wasn't like 2001, and they were expecting a sequel to 2001 to be all sort of abstract and weird like Kubrick, and what they got was more of a Spielberg-esque sort of 80s sci-fi movie. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't care for 2001 very much. So I'm one that is blasphemy, I know, but I'm one of the oddballs who actually much preferred 2010 over 2001. And so I thought, like, to me, this was like even better than some of these Spielberg 80s movies. I just had this like really weird feeling of dread. And of course it's really dated now because they had like the Cold War come to a head with the Russians in America. But again, it's really 80s. So yeah, this has always been one of my favorite science fiction movies, one of my favorite movies. I remember when I was a teenager, I used to watch this like probably more than yearly, maybe twice a year, because I love this movie so much. And I personally think it's undershadowed because people always compare it to the first one, and people who like the first one probably wouldn't like this one because it's a very different tone, but it's a tone I prefer personally.
I really like 2010, and actually I watched it probably 10 years ago, and I don't know if you know this, Mark. Arthur C. Clarke actually wrote 2 more books. There's 2000.
Yes, yeah, I did.
3001, and they're both actually pretty decent books.
I remember I started reading the 2061, but I don't know. I never made it through, but I'm sure it's good. Yeah.
Are we boring you?
Oh, I was gonna say I actually have not seen 2010. Um, yeah, and I'm not even sure I knew that movie existed. I mean, it's not to say that it wasn't bad or anything, but like
Well, I
I
think.
know nothing about it.
I mean that makes sense though, because it was a very underrated, under-publicized movie. It's got what's his name, Roy Schneider and
Yeah.
John Lithgow. Yeah, it was. I liked it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think I might have seen it once, but I have zero memory of it whatsoever. Like, I obviously wasn't blown away with it the first time I saw it, because then I would have seen it more than once. So, and remember it now. So I honestly can't speak to it. Don't remember it at all.
I think that's another movie you should put on your rewatch list.
Okay,
My turn.
Anna.
Yes. My number 6. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I knew it was going to be on somebody's list.
Oh, yeah, it's totally on my list. I love that movie.
Another comedy.
Yes, but I don't like. I have not seen it recently. I saw it as a kid and I loved it, and I'm afraid to see it now because I probably wouldn't like it, and I don't want to ruin the nostalgia for me. Like,
Yeah.
I want to remember it as being really good. And I loved Jessica Rabbit. Like, she's been on my cosplay list since I started cosplaying. It's just getting up the courage to wear something like that.
So thoughts on Who Framed Roger? I loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's not in my list, but I can't begrudge anybody who puts it in their list at all.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit was another classic movie, and the fact that you had Disney and Warner Brothers decide to collaborate on that movie to share cartoon properties was awesome, because everyone had always been wanting to see Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse on the same screen together. You got Daffy Duck versus Donald Duck when they were doing the piano playoff in the bar. It talked about the transition from black and white cartoons to color cartoons, where they showed Betty Boop where she was like, now I can't really get any work. And I thought that was a great kind of crime drama that was absolutely hilarious. I mean, even though the title character and most of the main characters were cartoons that absolutely did not exist in the normal cartoon landscape, I think they did a great job of saying, like, yeah, Roger Rabbit and his small circle of people, they are the stars. Yes, we have these other well-known characters, but they're not the main focus of this, and I think they did a great job in telling the story, in a very potent way. And actually, I want to read the book that it's based off of, because I heard the book is much different than the movie was.
It's based off a book?
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah, wait.
yeah.
You just blew our minds, Donald.
Roger Rabbit.
So, wow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
holy shit,
This
there's a
was-
Roger Rabbit book. And also, Christopher Lloyd, it seems like he's been in a lot of stuff that I just don't remember him being in.
Yeah. Yeah, this is never one of my favorite movies, but it's definitely a solid movie. It's definitely, a good choice. The one thing about this movie that always kind of irked me, because the title is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Well, how about that really evil-looking guy with, what's his name, Doom or something, with the glasses, like, maybe he's the one who framed Roger Rabbit. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, another one I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen this, so I don't have enough memory of it to speak about it. So another one I should rewatch, apparently.
Okay, my number 6, and I kind of played with the rules here, because this movie was actually filmed at the same. This is a sequel to a movie that was filmed at the same time as the first movie. So you could really kind of play the rules and say this is a 70s movie, but it was released in 1980, and that is Superman 2.
How did I know you were going there?
I have seen this movie. I've probably seen this movie more times than any other movie I've ever watched. I watched it once a day from the time I was 6 years old until I was 10 years old. It got played over and over again. I probably used up 2 or 3 copies of the VHS. The Donner cut is a giant piece of shit. Never watch it. But Superman 2, absolute one of my favorite movies of all time. Number 6 on my top 10 80s movie.
Oh, is the Donner cut bad? I didn't know that.
Wait, hold. Josh, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on your assessment of the Richard Donner cut. Yeah, because I mean, all right. When is the last time you went back and seen the Richard Lester version of Superman 2?
I don't know, probably over the summer sometime. It was on network television. I sat and watched it.
Are you sure? Because the network versions, a lot of times they take stuff that is in the Richard Donner cut and mix it in with the ones that's in the Richard Lester cut. So
the Richard Donner cut ends the same exact as the first movie. He goes back in time and undoes everything.
Well, that's because
twice in 2 movies. No. Now,
well, that's because he never got to finish his version, though. Remember, he was shooting 1 and 2 back to back. That was his thing, and then he got into issues with the producers, and they were like, "All right, fine, and we're kicking you off the project." So there was a lot of stuff that he never even got to finish. He says in the special features that that's not what he wanted to do. That's all he had in order to go back, because the going back in time was supposed to be the end of the second one, not the first one. But they told him, you have to finish the first one now, worry about the second one later. So that sequence was already shot, and then he decided to shift that to the first one.
See, all I'm hearing are reasons why the Donner cut sucks.
Oh, wow.
Well, you guys could probably debate this forever, but you know way more about this movie than I do.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know anything about the Donner cut. I remember Superman 2 from the old days. It was my favorite movie for a long time, or one of my favorite movies. Didn't quite make my list, but wouldn't hold any grudge for anybody. Put it whatever cut you want to put on there. I just don't. I don't know what the Donner cut is, so I can't speak to that.
It's
like all I know is the theatrical release that I saw, and that is my favorite Superman movie. I think it is a classic 80s movie, and like when Superman Returns came out, which again I think it gets much more flack than it deserves. But anyway, when that came out, I did a Superman marathon and watched all the Superman movies, and Superman 2 is by far my favorite of the bunch.
All right, I think we will move on to number 5. Acton.
Okay, my number 5, and here is where Back to the Future comes in for me. I forget now who had it and when they had it. Don Willie had it a little earlier.
No, I had it at number 8.
Oh, it was Mark. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Back to the Future. I mean, Mark already talked about it. Just always a classic, one that really holds up. I watched it recently, actually just before we did our time travel top 25. I rewatched it and loved it all over again. And there was stuff in it I didn't even remember for the first time. So yeah, I won't talk about it too much, but just a classic. Can't have a top 10 for me without putting Back to the Future on it.
Agreed. About mine later.
And since we already talked about it, we don't have to talk about it too. I mean, because it is kind of getting to almost 2 hours. So
somebody else had it on their list. Who was it before you? Mark had it. So both Acton and
Mark. Yeah.
Okay, Don.
All right, so number 5 for me. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This was, possibly, or still, this is the quintessential Star Trek movie. Great top to bottom. I mean, the fact that they took a one-off storyline from the original and decided, you know what, we're going to bring this back. We're going to blow it up into this huge thing, and we're going to really explore the character of Khan Noonan Singh. And, you know, who would he have become if things went from pretty much from bad to worse? And his motivations behind wanting to destroy Kirk and bring the Federation to its knees as much as he possibly could. Yeah, I think that as far as sci-fi movies are concerned, as far as action movies are concerned, you know, you really there's not much better you can possibly do.
I agree with everything that you just said, Don. This is actually higher on my list. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's higher up on my list. And yeah, it is the perfect Star Trek film. And with one of the
this is
in all of cinematic history.
Yeah, this is higher on my list too, so I'll talk about it later.
Me too. It's also coming up. It's also higher on my list.
Well, at least you guys can't bust my balls about it not being on the list.
Okay. If you didn't on your list, I would have looked down on you. Yeah. Okay. That brings it to Mark, correct?
Okay, so my number 5 is Star Wars Episode 6: Return of the Jedi. Definitely classic 80s movie. I'm sure some people might have it higher on their list, or maybe not. I don't know, but yeah, let's look past the Ewoks. I mean, some people try to say the Ewoks are worse than Jar Jar Binks. They're not that bad. They kind of bring the movie down, and it was just made a bit childish. But there's so much more than the Ewoks in this movie. The whole this is where the whole thing comes to a head with Luke and his father, where he turns his father to the good, gets him to kill the Emperor. It was such an amazing ending, and basically what the whole trilogy was building towards. And it's classic lines like "it's a trap" that are still talked about a lot. So yeah, it's just a great film.
How can we repel fire of that magnitude?
I have this high on my list. I'm going to reserve talking about it until then.
Yeah.
And as I said, I made a personal rule for myself. I just wanted to do one movie per franchise just to have more of a variety. So I chose a different film. So I didn't put this in my top 10. However, come on, it's Return of the Jedi. Like, what else is there to say? Classic movie.
Yeah, I'm right there. Like, a lot of the stuff that I put on my list has nostalgia value. And I watched this recently, as we started dating, and he realized I had never seen the Star Wars original trilogy. Yeah. So he made me go back and watch it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really good. But a lot of other stuff has so much more nostalgia because I watched it when I was younger, and I've seen it, a couple times since then. So that's the only reason why it's not on my list.
All right. So that was Mark, right?
Oh, yes, it's my turn, right?
So what is your number 5?
My number 5 is Princess Bride.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we already talked about that. So,
Yeah.
like I said, it was higher on my list. It's number 5.
It is. It's just a great movie.
Yeah, it's really good.
It
And this is another one I didn't watch until we started dating, but it just kind of stuck with me.
I think we watched it on Valentine's Day.
I think we did, yeah.
I think our first Valentine's Day we watched it.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, classic love movie. Yeah, love film. Yep. As among other, romance film, family film. Fantasy film. It just covers a lot of areas. It's good.
Why? Yeah, can't forget. My name is Inigo Montoya.
Oh yeah.
You're kidding my father.
So classic. Yeah.
Okay. My number 5 is Aliens. I know somebody's going to have it higher on their list.
Yeah, I know who that person
Right
is
here.
going to be.
Basically,
Game over, man.
I don't want to talk about it too much because I want to reserve that for people who have it higher up on their list. But I'll just say what I loved about Alien. Well, Alien, first of all, For me, Alien is a straight up horror movie. It is less science fiction than it is horror. They took James Cameron took a straight up horror movie and made an action horror movie, and it was awesome, and it blew my mind, and it's the only movie ever that gave me nightmares. Okay.
Yeah.
Number
And,
four.
well, I'll just.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I was just going to say. Well, I guess we'll talk about it when Mark gets to it too. But I knew Mark would have this on his list at least. I didn't know if anybody else would. And this goes into the category. Just I don't remember it well enough. I need to rewatch it. I haven't seen it in a long time. And it's not one that I saw hundreds of times. I might have seen it 5 or 6 times, but all the way through. So that's the only reason it's not on my list. I just don't remember it well enough, and I didn't go back and watch it. So, but I knew that at least one person would have it.
Okay, so number 4, coming up to the end here. Acton or
Yeah, number 4. Okay, so this is where Terminator comes in on my list.
okay.
My number 4, just. And I'm not really a huge fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, to be honest, but I kind of love this despite the fact that it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. It was just because it's the best, or one of the best time travel stories, and actually ended up being number 1 on our collective top 25 of time travel movies. Mark mentioned it earlier, just how tragic that or was it Don Willie? Sorry, one of you guys talked about earlier the tragedy of the ending and how you find out that's what it was always meant to be. That he was always going to be, John Connor's father and die, and just kind of the secular nature of it and how it just really tied together. I love time travel stories like that. And so to me, this was just the classic. And plus the Terminator was scary as shit in the 80s. Like that thing that they could just never kill it. And you just think the movie's over, but then it's like, it's crawling. It's half of its body still like crawling after them. Just a classic movie.
And it never occurred to me until right this moment, and I can't believe how dumb I am for not ever realizing this. But the whole John Connor's message for Sarah Connor, there's no fate but what we make, it's wrong. John Connor's mere existence proves that wrong, and that's freaking so sad.
Oh yeah, that is true. That is true.
Okay.
Sarah Connor. Oh man.
Okay.
So it's up to me now, right? Number 4, classic, and you guys have already mentioned this before. Back to the Future. Back to the Future. That was one of those that had on VHS, and quote Biggie Smalls, "I let the tape rock till the tape pop." That was one that I just remember the very beginning. I used to rewind, when he hooks up the big amplifier and he goes and he just, the amplifier explodes and throws him halfway across the room. And I thought the whole premise was awesome. And then to find out that there's actually little Easter eggs from him changing time. Like, all right, so the mall was the Twin Pines Mall in the beginning, and then because he mowed one of the pines down where that when he mowed one of the pines down, is like when he goes back, it's not the Single Pine Mall. Like, and I never noticed that before.
Like we would name a mall the Single Pine Mall.
Yeah, so that was awesome. There was so much about it. I thought it was a very inspirational story that just tells you, hey, look, you don't, just because you're a nerd now doesn't mean that you have to be a nerd, or like not even necessarily a nerd, but because you're somebody who gets picked on at one point in your life doesn't mean that you have to spend your entire life getting picked on, and you can turn the table on the bully. And I like that part of the story, definitely.
Okay, Mark, you're up.
Okay, so my number 4, which has also already been mentioned, is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Now, I will say, like, yeah, this has always been my favorite Star Trek. I was so obsessed. I used to watch this movie daily at one point. I can account to that. I do think this is the best Star Trek movie, and it's, because if you think about it, when Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out, now some people liked it. I'm not one of them. I think that was awful, that bomb, and it wasn't very popular. So the Star Trek franchise was in jeopardy. But these filmmakers came up with this great idea that this is why Star Trek is so popular. It's what revitalized it. It's what made it good, and it's just that tragic ending just topped off the movie. So yeah, what more can I say about it? Awesome movie.
Yeah, they really brought back the Star Trek franchise with this movie. And I would go as far as to say it's not only one of the best or the best Star Trek movie, it's one of the best science fiction movies ever, period, of anything. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's up to you, yeah.
Yes. All right, my number 4, right? Number 4?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're at 4.
My number 4 is Heathers. I love Heathers. That I don't know, like there's.
That was Winona Ryder and
the
Christian Slater.
Christian Slater.
I want to say Bale. I want to say Christian Bale, and I knew that was wrong.
And, like some of the lines from it, like "fuck me gently with a chainsaw," and it was just so funny, and just I love this movie. It was. And Christian Slater's character getting the entire school to sign a suicide note because they didn't read what was signing, and it was just fantastic.
Oh my god! Yeah.
It's one of those dark comedies.
Yeah, it was really dark. And
you have a lot of comedies on your list for someone who doesn't.
Comedies. Like, they're not just comedies.
Yeah, it's not like a ha-ha comedy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is. I hadn't considered this movie, but it's definitely a classic 80s movie. It's definitely a great movie. Always, yeah, it's got that sort of dark humor. It's one of the first of its kind. And that wasn't the line. Oh, that Heather Channel is one bitch that deserves to die. Like, it's just a classic movie.
You know what I remember about that movie? And it's one of the old. I remember the croquet scene. I remember that, and I remember the kid at the end who was. He tried to commit suicide, but he didn't.
No, he tried to kill the school. He put bombs in the basement.
The chubby kid.
Oh yeah, okay.
Wasn't he in like a wheelchair on crutches or something at the end of the movie?
Yeah,
my heart broke for that kid because he jumped off the roof or something and tried to kill. Like that's what stuck with me in that movie.
He got made fun of because they were like, oh, look at the unpopular kid trying to act like the popular girl who committed suicide and failing like they do when they always try to copy us. Like it was just it was awful.
That's what stuck with me there, and man, I don't like that movie. Okay, I guess it's my turn.
Yep.
My number 4 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. This movie it's the perfect action adventure movie. I don't know if it can ever be topped as far as that particular genre. Harrison Ford is the perfect action hero, and just everything about that movie, from the setting, we've got it set just before it was like 1933 or 36, something like that. But before World War II really geared up, and so just the setting, so it's almost like teaching you a little bit of history as well.
Actually, there was a Saturday Night Live skit about the high school kids wanting to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark for history class, but yeah. Go on. Sorry. I think it just made me think of that.
Would be the perfect movie to have for a sub to fill in history class. Absolutely, for sure. In fact, the Indiana Jones novels got me some extra credits in my history class. Because the reason
But-
the reason why they were using hydrogen instead of helium is because all the helium deposits that they knew about at the time were in the United States.
Yeah, really. I think a revolutionary movie, and one which many tried to copy, including the sequels, tried to recreate some of the. It was just, I don't know, just the timing and just everything was just so perfect in that movie. Not everything was perfect in that movie, and I mean, I'll take that back. But I mean, just the way the action sequences and just some of the comedic timing, the classic scene where the guy with the swords and just he just shoots him down. I mean, just classic, and those kinds of things. It's just many movies of the last 30, 40 years have tried to, or I guess 30 years have tried to recreate that, and I don't think any of them ever have. So it's just a classic.
And that scene you mentioned with the swordsman, that was an accident. Harrison Ford had food poisoning. That was supposed to be like a 5-minute fight, and he couldn't do it. So he said, "Can I just shoot the guy?" And he said, "Yeah, go ahead, do it." So just all these is like all the happy accidents that happened to make that film. Oh my gosh, it will forever be one of my favorites.
Indeed. Yeah, it's actually higher on my list, so I'll talk about it later.
Okay, fair enough.
I am not going to say anything about this movie because I don't want to incur the hate of everyone here and everyone on the internet. I will say that I like The Last Crusade, and that's all I'll say.
Alrighty then. Okay. Okay, so we're at my number 3 now.
3.
All right, let me draw up my top 10 list. So my number 3 is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which was that just Mark's number 4. So I believe we just talked about it, and I just said that this was one of the best science fiction movies of all time, and easily the best Star Trek movie. And that's all I'll say since we just talked about it.
Okay, so Don.
Okay, so my number 3. And before I begin, I just want to say, Mark.
Shame.
Saw this one coming.
The first Indiana Jones film, and yeah, I mean a number of classic scenes, like where he's fighting the big Nazi in front of that plane, and like they're tumbling in and out and off of the plane, and then finally it comes to the very end where the guy thinks he's got him, and then Indy's just like, he's like, what? And next thing you know, he turns around and just splat. Of course, looking for the Ark of the Covenant and them finding it only for the United States to take it and just warehouse it. It's just like, wait, this is like one of the most important discoveries of anything ever, and it's sitting in some giant warehouse. And that was pretty much where they left it. I mean, come on, this is a guy he was an archaeologist, an adventurer. His students in school, somehow knew. It's like, even though they didn't know particularly about his adventures, they were still like, he was still the popular teacher. He's teaching about digging for stuff and saying X doesn't mark the spot and all this other stuff. And wasn't there the one student that had like written on her eyelashes or not eyelashes but eyelids that she loved him or something like that?
Yeah, I was just thinking of that when you were talking about that. Yeah, I mean,
like, yeah, and he's just a guy who, to a certain extent, is trying to preserve history, but he's going on all of these misadventures, because it's like the Nazis are out there looking for things, and this is, kind of harkens back to real history, because the Nazis did actually go digging for historical artifacts because they thought that's what was going to help them to conquer the world. And You get the Nazis kind of not necessarily brought down by one man, but at least thwarted with some of their schemes by one man with a fedora and a bullwhip. So I mean, like, come on, how can you not love that, man? That just screams America.
And I had all the toys and everything from Raiders of the Lost Ark. I had the Well of Souls, the play set with it had like snakes carved into it, but it had also like actual sculpted like snakes that you could move around, and they promptly all got lost. But just from the toy line, again, I feel like I'm talking about the film score a lot in this video, but I mean, it needs to be said, the Raiders March is one of the great pieces of film scorage in history.
Mark, damn you, Mark.
Nah, I'm going to sit silent still. All right, can we move on to my number 3?
Yes, we can move on to your number 3.
All right. So my number 3, I'm sure we're going to talk about it when we get to number 1 as well. But for me, it ranked in at number 3, which is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Absolutely, to me, the best Star Wars movie. A lot of people agree. To me, this exemplifies the best of Star Wars. It's just, yeah, you got the classic, revelation, Darth Vader's Luke's father. Spoiler. Come on, everyone knows that by now. But yeah.
Well, we just talked about fathers, brothers, cousins, former roommates, space.
Yeah, but and the Yoda, and this is when Yoda, like the scenes with Yoda was like just so amazing, especially to start off with him like being this goofball, and he was like, "Take you to whom I will." I mean, this is hilarious, and great, and then it turned out he became Yoda.
Yeah. Oh, and the argument, him fighting off R2D2 because R2D2 like took
yeah, and then you learn like he's this awesome like Jedi warrior, like trains Luke, and it's just in the Cloud City and everything. This movie is near perfect. It's in my top 20 of all-time favorite movies. So that means these next top 3 are all my top 20 all-time favorite movies. So so now we're getting to the best of the best. But yes, absolutely loved it. Hard to put it only at number 3. I don't blame anyone for putting it at number 1. It was a really strong contender for me. But yeah, that's my number 3.
Actually, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and chime in now. It's 3 on my list as well.
Okay.
And there are very specific reasons why it's not number 1. It is objectively the best Star Wars film. It's just not my favorite Star Wars film. And those are 2 very different things, I think.
Fair enough. It's my favorite. But yeah.
Okay, so if anybody else doesn't have anything to say about Empire Strikes Back, we'll move on to Anna.
Okay. My number 3 is Dune. I love the Dune series. I've read all of the books except for the new ones. I saw that movie. I watched Children of Dune when it was on Sci-Fi Channel. I love the Dune series. I heard rumor they might reboot it, and I'm like, oh yes, do it! I love it.
What, Sting was in that, right? I think. And
yeah.
And Patrick Stewart, I think, was in that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
That's a freaking star power behind it.
I just love the story and the characters. I love Dune.
Yeah, I can't blame you for putting it that high. Dune's a great movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to be vocal this time. I actually disagree because I read the book and I wasn't blown away by it, but I liked it. But then I immediately watched that movie, and then I watched the sci-fi miniseries, and the sci-fi miniseries is so much better. Like, I think this movie had potential, but I think they tried to cram it into one film because I remember when I first saw it before I read the books, I had absolutely no clue what was going on. So I think, and David Lynch kind of didn't really want to do it. He was kind of tricked into doing it by the studio. So I think he kind of phoned it in. So I think I don't know. Me personally, I think it does the novel a bit disservice where the sci-fi miniseries did it much better. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's so high on my list not because it itself is such a great movie and it's so much better than all the other movies on my list. It's because I have like I love this series so much that even though this particular movie wasn't like super phenomenal, it was still a good movie. Like I still thought it was a great movie. But it's like I just love the story in the series so much. Like it's probably one of my favorite sci-fi stories ever. Like I absolutely love the entire Dune universe, and like I said, like I'm dying and hoping that they're gonna reboot this whole series and like show or some movies or something. Like I want more Dune. Love it.
I can.
Yeah, I would actually like to see a reboot as well. I would like to see this movie done better on the big screen. So yeah, I'm with you there.
My number one is actually going to be similar to your reasoning for why Dune is so high on your list.
Yeah.
Like I look at it and acknowledge that, you know what, this is not the best 80s movie ever. It's just my favorite. Yeah. So I totally get that. Yeah. Okay, so my number 3 was Empire Strikes Back, which I chimed in with Mark, and for all the reasons that had one of the great film twists of all time, and anybody who lived during that time and got to experience that twist, I think they were forever changed. There was like, but your life was in 2 parts, but before you knew that Darth Vader was Luke's father and after. That's how kind of it was. Yeah. I'm speaking obviously a little bit hyperbolically, but it really was almost that big.
Yeah, I actually remember after I saw that movie, I remember telling my mom, I was like, "No, he's not. He's lying. He can't be lying." My mom was like, "I think he really is Luke's father." I'm like, "No, it can't be." I was like, Luke himself up there. No.
Okay, so I think we'll move on to number 2. Acton, you're up.
Okay, so my top 2 are going to both be movies that have already been talked about, and my number 2, Don Willie, get ready to cue it up. My number 2 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think we've talked about this a bunch already. I thought that this was. I just feel like a many movies tried to copy it, and no movie ever did. Temple of Doom was terrible. Last Crusade was the one that got back the closest to recreating with the magic of the first movie, in my opinion. But nothing will ever beat Raiders of the Lost Ark as far as this particular genre. And that's all I have to say about it, because we've already talked about it a bunch.
Okay, fair enough.
Shame.
Oh man,
for somebody.
Yeah. Oh man. So
hey Don, you're
number
up.
Number
2.
Yeah, number 2. So my number 2 is going to be Star Wars Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, Josh said it earlier. There was the time before you knew Darth Vader was Luke's father, and there was the time after. And I remember watching this on HBO. I was like 5 years old. And, around 5 is where you really start to become aware of how the world works. And I remember sitting there, and when he says to Luke, he's like, Luke is like, Obi-Wan told me. He's like, yeah, he told me you killed him. He was like, no, I am your father. And I'm just like, wait, they can't do that. What do you mean the bad guy is Luke's father? It was like, that just blew my mind. It was just the whole concept of, wait, Luke is the hero. The bad guy is his father. How did that even happen? And so until I had seen Return of the Jedi, and then started reading some of the books that came out later, and finally when the damn prequels came out. We're not going to talk about those. Like this had been a journey as to seeing like how in the world is this even possible. But at the time, being five, that just was mind blowing because up until then it was like they're clear good guys, they're clear bad guys, and there is no way that they could possibly be related. And just the thought of the main villain that we had seen up until that point is the hero's father, and he just cut off his hand. Like, what?
Did you guys know, or there's this documentary where I just found this out recently. I don't know if you guys were aware of this too, but the only people that knew that Luke was, or Darth Vader was Luke's father, besides the, directors, George Lucas and all the producers and everybody, the only actors that knew were Luke and James Earl Jones until the premiere, because they had, the guy who does the body of Darth Vader, he speaks Darth Vader's lines, and then they do, James Earl Jones dub over later. So he spoke the line, "I killed your father," and so everybody, all of the actors, the only one who knew was Mark Hamill, and then they filmed like some of the things where he's responding specifically to that. They filmed it separately in secret, so only Mark Hamill, and then they like took him into this, into their office secretly and had him sign a thing that he would never say a word to anybody. And so like only him and James Earl Jones knew about it. Even like Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher, all them, they found out when they watched the finished product for the first time.
There's a documentary called "I Am Your Father" about James Prowse, the guy in the Darth Vader suit, and it's fantastic. It talks all about how he became, or David Prowse, not James Prowse, sorry, David Prowse, and it's all about how he became alienated from Lucasfilm. It is a fantastic documentary on Netflix. It's called "I Am Your Father."
I'll check that out.
But yeah, it was one of the films that had like, for the 80s, like it's more commonplace now, but for the 80s to have like a dark ending like that and like a family action adventure film was a really bold move, and I could see like many studio heads or whatever probably freaked out, but since the first film was so successful, he had carte blanche to do it, and it was actually really revolutionary, I think.
All right, Mark, I think you're next. Is that correct?
Okay, so my number 2 is a movie I know won't be on anyone else's list, and I wouldn't be too surprised if few people here said I've never seen it or even I've never heard of it. But I have to be honest, like I'm not gonna just pick. I'm not trying to be hipster, but I have to pick the movies that I personally love, and to me, this was always like a masterpiece, and that is Starman. It's a 1982 film with done by John Carpenter. It stars
Jeff Bridges.
What's the guy? Jeff Bridges. Yeah, and Karen Allen. And you talked earlier, Josh, about how never in the story your first crush was the princess in the movie. My first crush was Karen Allen in this movie. I think she was absolutely beautiful as the lead who lost her husband, and then this alien comes down and takes her husband's form, and they form, and she can't have children, but he uses his like alien powers to impregnate her, and that was such a touching scene to me. Like I could imagine like the studio exec saying, "Oh, E.T. was very popular. Let's do a version of E.T. but with romance." And so I can imagine that was the way they sold it. But the way they played out, I actually preferred to E.T. personally. So this has always been one of my favorite films. And there also this year a film came out called Midnight Special, which a lot of people have been likening to Starman, which is I could tell it was borrowing heavily from Starman. So it does have its legacy. And if you watch I watched the commentaries with John Carpenter and Jeff Bridges, and they both talked about how this is one of their favorite movies and how it's a masterpiece. I think it's underrated. So I don't care what anyone else says. That is my number 2.
It's a very underrated film, and it birthed a short-lived television series as well. I don't know if you ever caught that.
I watched a bit of that on YouTube recently. Oh my God, it was awful.
It had the dude from Airplane in it. The guy from Airplane was the lead, was the starman in that movie.
Oh my god! Yeah, that TV show didn't date very well. I'll just say it that way.
Wow. Wow. I remember seeing Starman a lot when I was a kid. That used to come on HBO all the time. But I haven't seen it since then. So unfortunately, I don't have the same nostalgic feeling about it. I mean, I do remember, Jeff Bridges being the main guy. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember much about Starman. So.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that boat too. I actually haven't seen it in a while either, so I don't remember it enough.
I think it as a film. I think that totally holds up to modern times, in my opinion.
I really enjoyed Starman. I don't blame you for putting it in your top 10. Number 2, I think might be a little high, but hey, that's the fun of doing.
How I feel. Yeah.
Okay, Anna.
My number 2 is Predator.
I kind of saw that coming.
Yeah. I I love the Predator series. I don't know, like it's just like aliens using us to hunt, like as sport, hunting us for sport, like that. I really liked that. Yeah, like the whole concept of it, and like
and the Predator's freaking scary.
Yeah, and
looking.
the Predator's not only scary looking, but it looks badass too. Like it's badass but scary. And then they like turn invisible and like it's just awesome.
There's a rumor, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going to say it anyway because. But the rumor is Arnold Schwarzenegger actually had to lose weight because he was so big that the Predator looked too small. I don't know if that's true or not.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I gotta say this was a strong contender for my top 10. It barely made it. I don't blame anyone for putting it at number 2. I personally would put this above the Terminator. I know I'm an oddball for that, but I love this film. I like the whole get to the shopper. I mean, it's just it's just a great. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said about the Predator, like his invisibility. You talk about things that have been copied and mimicked throughout the years. This has been mimicked so many times. Like I reviewed a lot of Star Trek episodes. It's like, oh, they're taking from the Predator again. I mean, yeah. So this, I think, yeah, I love the Predator.
Go on, do it now. Oh man, yeah. You know what? I actually thought about. I thought about putting this into my top 10 as well, and I mean, like. Another classic line is like, "You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed."
Governor Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
Ventura, yeah.
No, Jesse Ventura like made a career off of that one line. I mean, I think he wrote a book. He wrote a book called that. And we were watching WWF back in the day. He was like the announcer for WWF, and he would always bring that up, like, I'm the star of that movie. The best line of that movie was he would always bring it up all the time. Like that was like he made a career off of that one line.
Of him, yeah. Oh man. So my number 2, we've talked about this one to death, so we don't need to talk about it very long. My number 2 is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Best Star Trek movie, one of the best science fiction movies of all time. Before we get to number 1, I'll say, keep in mind that when I explain my number 1, I lived in a very small town in Indiana. We had a 2-screen theater. So movies that were out like 2 years ago would hit our theaters, and then so we didn't always get everything in order. So you're like, hey, that movie came out first. Well, not where I'm from. Just remember that.
All right.
So we had number 1 now.
With acting.
All right, my number 1. And should be no surprise to anyone, especially not Mark. I did mention that I would only do one movie per franchise, and I didn't do Return of the Jedi. So by a process of elimination, you can figure out that my number one is The Empire Strikes Back. For all the reasons we've already talked, I mean, we've talked to death about it already, so don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But everything that everyone has said about it is, and just. Yeah, just such a classic, and really, I mean, for me, the movie that got me into the Star Wars franchise, because I was 3 when the first one came out, and so I didn't. And though that's my earliest memory is going to see the original Star Wars, I didn't really get to actually appreciate it until after I'd already gotten really into Empire Strikes Back, so several years later. So yeah, just an all-time great for me.
All right. Done. Number 2.
Number 1.
One. My bad. Number 1.
Yeah. Number 1. And I'm gonna preface this with a little something.
You got the touch. You got the power.
Yeah.
You're gonna get me copyrighted, man.
Oh man. So yeah, my number 1 is Transformers the movie. You know, this was one of the movies when I was a kid that was just like forget about once a year. This was like once a week for like probably 6 months straight. Don't ask me why I fell in love with the movie, but I thought the movie was great. I mean, you know, the fact that they actually were bold enough to take the step of killing off practically everybody from the first 2 seasons and then say, hey, you know what? Cool, we're going to bring in these other characters and we're going to make you enjoy them just as much as you did the original cast. You had a great threat, something that it had, you know, that the concept was kind of mind-blowing. Here you had a planet that went around eating other planets and devouring Transformers, and then you find out that planet itself is a huge Transformer, and it kind of deepened the mythos of the Transformers lore, and it had like the greatest soundtrack ever. So, yeah, I mean, Transformers the movie. I'm not even going to say anymore. Just watch the damn movie. Trust me, you'll love it too.
So I have a question about Transformers the movie, Don. How did you feel about Rodimus Prime? Hot Rod was my favorite character in the movie. I was like, he's the new leader, yeah, but I hated the name Rodimus Prime.
I didn't have a problem with Rodimus Prime. I thought it was kind of interesting though, how like he went from being a teenager to a man, all by picking up and opening the Matrix, and then it was like he was almost reborn to a certain extent. I'll
go back and watch the scene where he opens up the Matrix every once in a while. Just YouTube it and watch it.
Yeah, and like when you hear Optimus say, arise, Rodimus Prime, and and all before that, Galvatron is all cocky and was like, I'll kill you the same way I killed Prime and all this other stuff, and him just being like, all right, you know what, here, hold these couple of punches, and he threw him out, and he's able to rally the troops and able to defeat Unicron after that, and it was like, yes, it was just charged, it was driven. I loved it.
I agree, basically. It was 10 on my list. I don't think it's on anybody else's list. There's just us two.
Yeah, as you guys are talking about it, I'm like, did I ever actually see this movie? I mean, it seems like I would have because I was so much into the show when it was on, but I don't remember them killing off all the Transformers, or I just have no memory of this at all.
You blocked it out. It was traumatizing.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
I mean, Because they kill some of them in brutal fashion. I mean, they jump aboard an Autobot shuttle that's going from one of the moons of Cybertron to Earth. They go in, and the Decepticons are literally just slaughtering everybody. Like Starscream is shooting people, and you got the Constructicons shooting people, and then Megatron turns into the gun, and Starscream is just using them bang, 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 and then at the very end of the sequence,
Ironhide.
yeah, but right before that, Starscream is kind of berating Megatron, like, oh yeah, yeah, this is easier than attacking the Autobots, the Autobots moon base like you should have. And then Megatron is like, you idiot. He's like, look, when we slip past their defenses in their own shuttle, we'll be able to take all of them out, and Autobots will be vanquished forever. And then Hound comes and he grabs Megatron's leg, and he's like, no. And Megatron says such heroic nonsense, and then they pan down to the cannon on his arm, and all you see is whoosh. And then, like, you pretty much knew what happened after that. They didn't need to actually to show it. So, yeah, and I mean, that's some like the first like 10 or 15 minutes of the movie.
You're right. That was Hound. I was thinking that was Ironhide.
No, that was Ironhide. That was Ironhide that got shot. Hound got shot in the shoulder.
Okay.
He was like the first, the second one, and then they shot Blue Streak and
Prowler.
Blue Streak and Prowl. Yeah.
Prowl was there.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it was all
he had smoke. Yeah, smoke coming out of his eyes and all that. It was. I mean, yes, it's robots. Yes, it's a cartoon, but that was actually kind of brutal for, to be like a movie based off of a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, Sideswipe I don't think was in the movie at all. So I'm going to hold out that he was still alive. The Lamborghini Sideswipe.
Yeah, Sideswipe and also Sunstreak.
You're right, Sunstreak didn't. Yeah. All right. I think we'll move on. Who's next? Mark, number 1.
Cool. Okay. So my number 1 has been mentioned already, but I want to talk about it in more detail, and that is Aliens. Absolutely. When I went to film school, I attended this lecture where this guy did this whole hour-long class on how this movie was the perfect masterpiece. He dissected it. I mean, I already thought that, but he just really drilled home even more to me. It's like got perfect structure. It's an action. It's a horror. It's sci-fi. Like just the journey that Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley goes through in this movie is perfect. How she's dealing with the loss of her own child because she goes like 80 years into the future because of been in hypersleep, and then has to find another orphan child and sort of becomes a surrogate mother, and all this while these scary aliens and like they use the conventions of like the beep beep, the motion detector thing. They used it so well that it was like copied off of years after that, and it was such a high tension. It was the horror and the action perfectly was the most high tension film I've ever seen. So it is, to me, is one of my all-time favorite movies. Absolutely loved it. And I will confess, though, that I didn't see it until the 90s, till late 90s, actually, because when I first came out, it was too scary for me. I don't think my parents would let me watch it, and I think I saw bits of it on cable, and I just was too scared by it because it is a scary movie. And I also confess that I'm actually not a huge fan of the first Alien movie. Like, the first Alien movie I thought was passable. It was okay, but the second one I think is amazing. I know there's a lot of debate about that, but a lot of people fall on different lines. But for me, Aliens, masterpiece.
Aliens is also my number 1. I really love Aliens. I'm like obsessed with Aliens. Yeah, I got you see my alien statue here in the background. I love this. Like, if we have a daughter, we are so cosplaying as Ripley and Newt. Like that's happening.
Absolutely, that's awesome.
Probably the greatest female hero of ever.
Yeah, she was phenomenal. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess that's Mark and Anna. My number one is Return of the Jedi. I will acknowledge that objectively, The Empire Strikes Back is a better film. But just from my experience of going to see Return of the Jedi, it was the first film I ever saw in theaters. Now, granted, Star Trek II came out in theaters nationwide before Return of the Jedi. It didn't hit my town until after Return of the Jedi. I saw Return first. And just everything about that movie, from seeing Jabba the Hutt and 3PO being, basically sold to Jabba by Luke, and I felt personally betrayed by Luke in that moment. And then when he came to rescue them, and he pops that freaking green lightsaber, and my 5-year-old mind goes, "Holy shit, they can be green!" And from that moment on, I got Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, and my favorite movie of all time.
And listen, don't forget the Ewoks. You know you love the Ewoks.
The Ewoks don't grate on me nearly as much as they do other people. The sequence where one is driving the speeder, okay, yeah, I'll give you that one. but I don't care.
Yeah, and you know what? The Ewoks have never bothered me either, but people will say they're too childish or whatever, but I was a child when I watched them, so I guess that's probably why they never bothered me, because and then it just years later as an adult when people were like, "Oh yeah, the Ewoks are childish," I was like, "Oh, they are? I don't know, I love them." They were, because I was a kid at the time I saw them, so. But yeah, I never had any huge issue with the Ewoks either.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I don't.
Ewoks are fine for me.
I don't begrudge you, Josh, for putting it as number one. I could certainly see, for a while, I think I considered my favorite Star Wars film as well. But then eventually I went back to Empire because there's no Ewoks in Empire. But I think it's close. They're both really good movies. And yeah, it's a trap.
William DeMarco in the chat says Return of the Jedi is my favorite all-time movie ever. So I'm not alone. Huzzah! But yeah, it's just the overall experience, going to the movies for the first time ever, and that's the first one. The only thing better I can imagine is A New Hope. Seeing that being your first movie-going experience, and the Star Destroyer coming over the top. That's the only way I can imagine anything topping it. So that was kind of an epic live discussion. It was a whole lot of fun.
Definitely.
Any honorable mentions, and then we'll wrap up the video and head out.
Honorable. Wow.
What? Yeah, most of my honorable mentions would.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll try to pick something that no one mentioned. Period. A lot of my honorable mentions people have mentioned. So we just say Rocky 3. Rocky 3.
Rocky 3. That's a Rocky 4. I like Rocky 4, but Rocky 4 is a bad movie, but I love it.
Yeah, Rocky 4 was a pretty terrible movie.
That's the one that was on television all the time, and I would watch it. It's a very bad movie, but it's one of my favorites.
Is it Gremlins was
Gremlins? That would be up there
for me. Yeah, it was on my original list, and it just didn't make it. But
yeah.
I really.
Oh, I just.
Or the Goonies. Nobody had the Goonies on the list. That's surprising.
Yeah, I just
thought the Labyrinth. Yes, the Labyrinth. That was definitely close on mine as well.
The Labyrinth and Dark Crystal both being on your list would have been.
Yeah, that's exactly. I liked Dark Crystal more than Labyrinth, so that's why I went with Dark Crystal instead of the Labyrinth.
Yeah, no, I just thought of an honorable mention. I was actually, before we started, I was like, oh, why didn't I put this on my list? And I'm sure everyone's going to have it on the list, but nobody had it on the list, and I'm shocked, is Die Hard. Die Hard is a classic action film.
Oh, yeah, you know what?
My favorite action film.
I'm in the same boat as you, Mark. I was almost going to put it on my list, and I'm like, oh, everybody else will have it on there. And it didn't quite make the cut, so I just barely made the cut, and then nobody had it. Yeah.
I had both
Yippee-ki-yay.
Die Hard and Lethal Weapon on my list originally, and they both fell off. And as I went, oh yeah, this one. Oh yeah, this one. Then before off the list.
Man. Yeah, a lot of great movies that unfortunately did not make the list. But again, as I stated before, this was not an enviable task by any stretch of the imagination.
It was way harder than I anticipated it being when I originally conceived of it. We're going to start doing top fives, and that's going to be even harder than top tens.
Yeah, on our channel.
Oh, wow.
So sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll have top 5 Tuesdays, and that's going to be something that we're going to do as long as we can think of topics. So, all right, I think we'll wrap this up. Guys, shout yourselves out, alphabetical order, Atkin, Don, and Mark.
All right. For those of you not familiar with my channel, check it out, especially if you're into Game of Thrones, because that's what I'm working on right now is my Game of Thrones predictions for season 7. It's very spoiler heavy, so if you're not into looking in the spoilers, you won't be able to appreciate it. But those of you who are, because that's the only way I can make predictions for season 7 is because there's so many damn spoilers out there. I have to try to work around them. But that's what I'm doing right now. So check out. I have 4 parts of it so far of my predictions focused on different characters. And part 5 is going to be out this week. I'm going to probably work on that tonight, and I'll probably be done by tomorrow or Monday, and that will be on the Lannisters. So check out my Game of Thrones stuff, hope to see you guys.
All right, I guess I'm up next. Again, I'm Don Willie. You can check me out on YouTube. I also do many Game of Thrones videos. I haven't put out a video in a little over a month, unfortunately, but my next set of videos, I will be reviewing episodes 1 through 7 of Star Wars in anticipation for Rogue One. So I'm going to start putting those out on Tuesday. So Tuesday will be episodes 1 and 2, Wednesday 3 and 4, etc., until Friday. Friday will be my Rogue One non-spoiler review, and then maybe Sunday I will do a spoiler review for Rogue One. And hopefully, if I can get the gang here all together, we will be doing a massive discussion on Westworld. And so far, there's at least one person here who wasn't a big fan of most of it, but we'll leave that later.
I love the ending. The ending ended well. I just did. Okay, but
You weren't supposed to spoil it.
It's me. I'm the one who, didn't like most of it, but it ended well, which is good. So, but yeah.
Well, still to see. I'm watching. I'm probably going to binge the rest of it tonight, so I'll see how it goes. Okay, so yes, Mark, my channel is Enchantment of Eternity. I try to do at least 3 videos a week. I try to do at least 1 Star Trek video a week, and 1 Game of Thrones video a week. I will be starting my Game of Thrones season 7 predictions, sort of like Atkins. So I'm just going to start mine next week. Keep an eye on that. I also review some shows that are currently on, like, Humans is currently on where I live, so I'm reviewing it. So those in the States can wait till next year when it comes out there. But I review Humans, Vikings just started, and Walking Dead is about to finish their season, so I'm doing that as well. But I'll cover more shows for next year. Like next February, there's going to be 7 shows that I want to cover, so I'm going to be nuts. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that.
And of course, if any of you are here from one of the other 3 channels in this stream, I'm Josh.
And I'm Anna.
And this channel is Geeksiders. Thank you so much for tuning in and being so active in the chat. At points, It was going by so fast I couldn't keep up with it. So this was awesome. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for this. And Acton, Don, Mark, I really appreciate you guys taking out time from your days to do this video. Is a 2-hour long stream, so super long
Thank
stream,
you.
but we made it through, and I think this was pretty friggin' awesome. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah,
Right,
lots
so,
of fun. Thanks for.
Yeah, it's great, really fun.
Okay, so that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching.
Bye.
Bye.